In the past few decades, there have been widespread disadvantages faced by groups in academia, and exploring the benefits to universities of work to promote equality and diversity. However, despite numerous efforts, many universities have yet to develop fully inclusive processes and cultures that provide true equality of opportunity to staff and students from all backgrounds. Angelica will take it from here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to welcome you to the very first World Higher Education Ranking Summit. And the summit brings together the world's brightest minds in higher education, prominent change makers, innovators, policymakers, human rights activists, to adopt new technologies and implement new innovative systems that will drive your institution forward. And today's topic is imperative for every university, for every higher institution across the globe, because today we will discuss how can universities guarantee equality and inclusion for all students and staff. And I'm really honored because we have incredible people on board today, people that drive change in their communities, that work hard on implementing non-discrimination, empowerment, and equality policies around them. And let me start by introducing our honorary panelists today. So let me introduce you to Dr. Georgette Zenati. Dr. Georgette is currently the Executive Vice President at Corporate Class Inc. and practice lead for their Center for Diversity and Inclusion. So, Dr. Georgette, we will be extremely happy to hear your insights on how you work within the field of diversity and inclusion. Dr. Georgette is alumna of the University of Toronto. She holds a bachelor degree in English and Political Science, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Liverpool, a Masters of Science from the Hanley School of Business, and leading strategic change within organization from Harvard University. She also holds a doctorate in business administration, and Dr. Zenati's research focuses on business leadership, diversity, inclusion, and the future of leadership. And I know that Dr. Georgette, you have your own initiative that you help help women, help empower women, and I'm going to be really honored if you tell us more about it after we start. And it's called Why Not You? Women Helping Empower Women, right?
Women helping empower women, correct, yes.
Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to hearing more about this extraordinary initiative. And now I would like to introduce Rita Kakati-Shaw. Rita, thank you so much for joining us today. As a multi-award winning career strategist, advisor to Fortune 500 companies, author, and a TV show host, Rita is extraordinary woman who has founded UMA, an international diversity and inclusion coaching consulting group, and a corporate training platform that empowers minorities around the world. This is truly extraordinary because we have Dr. Georgette and Rita with your initiative that is also aimed to tackle the issue of discrimination and help women around the world thrive. And it's really amazing to see you as you're a graduate from King's College London, my alma mater. Always a pleasure when King's College graduate is actually doing something incredible for the community. So Rita holds an honorary doctorate of humanities from Commonwealth University, and she has been advocating for gender equality, diversity, inclusion, empowering women around the world. Thank you so much, Rita, for your time today. And I would like to introduce you to Mark Lyman. Mark Lyman is joining us today from Geneva, and Mark Lyman is an executive director of the Universal Rights Group, a think tank focused on international human rights policy with offices in Geneva, New York, and Bogota. Prior to founding the Universal Rights Group, In 2013, Mark Lyman worked as a diplomat at the United Nations Human Rights Council from the body's establishment in 2016 until the end of 2012. This included participating in the negotiations, the institution building package on the council midterm review, and negotiations towards implementing environment rights. Between 2016 and 2012, Mark prepared reports for UN human rights bodies, and he's been extremely active within the field of human rights promotion, and it's truly impressive the scope of work that Universal Rights Group has done to strengthen international human rights across the world. Thank you so much for joining us today from across the world. I'm really honored to have such distinguished guests today discussing an imperative topic, diversity and inclusion, and non-discrimination. And prior we start this conversation, I think it's very important to stress out on the definition of non-discrimination. And useful definition of non-discrimination is contained in Article 1 of ILO, which provides that discrimination includes any distinction, exclusion, or preference made on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, political opinion, national extraction, or social origin, which has the effect of impairing equality of opportunity or treatment in the employment or occupation. And this is extremely vital for every institution across the globe, the notion of non-discrimination. So my first question today will be addressed to Mark. Mark, as you've been working in the field of human rights protection, and you've been working towards implementation of new policies regarding human rights across the globe, could you please tell us what should be done when students face discrimination, and what are the international human rights organizations, what is their stand on that? How have you, for example, in Universal Rights Group, countered the discrimination and inequality that come from students, staff, or anyone who referred to you?
Thank you, Angelica. It's really nice to be here and to see you all, so many powerful women and powerful voices. It's good to be the one male voice on this panel. As you correctly say, and it's not just in the ILO conventions, non-discrimination and equality are key founding principles of international human rights law. They are there. These principles of non-discrimination and equality are central to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They are central to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, one of the rights that's protected and promoted in that covenant, which all states are therefore supposed to promote and protect, is the right to education, which of course includes primary education, secondary education, and tertiary education. And the point I want to make is these principles of non-discrimination and equality refer to all of the rights in the covenant, including the right to education. So states have an obligation to ensure there is equal access to education, including university education. As you said, nobody should be discriminated against because of their race, their ethnic background, their gender, any disability they might have. That's just illegal. It's not even a question of doing the right thing. States have to ensure that none of that happens. And we've all seen in the past in America in the 1960s, for example, where African Americans were prevented from attending school. What happens when governments violate those obligations? Now, when it comes to universities, it's slightly more complicated than that, because universities as private sector organizations don't have obligations under international human rights law, but they do have responsibilities. And this has been shown by the United Nations Human Rights Council. and its work on business and human rights, especially the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which makes clear that businesses, even though they don't have obligations to promote the right to education, for example, without discrimination, they do have a responsibility to do so. And so what does that mean for universities, including those covered by your ranking? Well, it means they have a moral responsibility to ensure that all students are accepted, well, not all students are accepted, but no student is discriminated against, i.e. not able to enter the university because of their ethnic background or national background or gender or disability status. The first part of your question, which will be the second part of my answer, is what happens when they don't do that? Well, students are protected under international human rights law because students are, like anybody else, rights holders. Even if they're a minor, still as children, they have full protection under international human rights law. And so they have recourse to remedy. So, of course, the first recourse to remedy is at the national level. So if a child or a student feels they've been discriminated against because of the colour of their skin or their gender or their sexual orientation, then they can take that up with the national authorities, whether it's the ombudsman or whether it's going to court to hold the university accountable in court. And that's happened all over the world. Once that domestic remedy is exhausted, for example, if the government or the court system doesn't want to address that violation of the person's human rights, then the student can have recourse to the international protection mechanisms, whether that's UN Special Rapporteurs, whether it's the High Commissioner, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, whether it's the treaty bodies. So they can make individual complaints to those UN mechanisms and seek recourse. So that's the human rights. So it's really clear that universities are not allowed to discriminate against people. But I would also, and then I'll finish, spin that on its head and say that we shouldn't only look at this negatively, that universities are not allowed to discriminate against people. We should also spin it positively and make the very important point that promoting equality and non-discrimination is a good, I mean, it's a good thing to do, not only the right thing to do, it's the good thing to do for the university because it generates an inclusive, diverse student body where it's more enjoyable for students to participate. The university will do better because it has a more diverse range of voices and students of different backgrounds. And the last thing is it's good for the national economy as well, because education and access to the right to education, especially university education, has enormous benefits for national economies. And again, the more diverse the range of people are who can attend university, including from different socioeconomic backgrounds, then the better it is for the education system of the country, and the better it is in the long term for the economy and society in the country. I'll stop there.
Angelica, can I chime in here for a quick second?
Absolutely, please.
So I just want to, so all of that is, very accurate. I would say though, we're underlying all of that is unconscious bias. And so the intent, I always talk about moving from good intentions to integration, not just implementation. So if there's unconscious bias and decisions are being made about admissions and they're skewed towards, as we're making those decisions, we may not be realizing that we're actually opting people out. So what was interesting, for example, is there was, and I cover this case in training that I do, is there was a school in France called École Supérieure Normale, and I'm totally butchering my French here in terms of how I said the name of the school, but this school was actually admitting students. And because of COVID, they were no longer doing in-person interviews. So they went to these online where people were submitting stuff online, and they didn't know necessarily the gender of the people that were submitting. And so as a result of that, they saw a super high increase of women being admitted compared to previous years, because it was based on the quality of the admission, and no longer they couldn't see the person. So it was sort of these, that was not a factor in terms of their decision making. So I couldn't see, I couldn't see Rita, I couldn't see you, I could just see great content. And so they saw a surge in the number of women that were admitted as a result of that. And that was actually just last year or the year before. This was during COVID. So we can talk about good intentions, we can talk about all of the policies that you put into place, but if unconscious bias is still at play, that's not going to give you the outcome that you're looking for. So I think it's, we have to be thinking about, taking all of that, it's great, but how you apply that and put that into practice and these things is going to help us make a difference.
Thank you so much, Dr. Durjad. And applying to what Mark has just mentioned, this is absolutely imperative for every institution to follow those things. However, we have this thing where there is, it's hard to gather the evidence on the discrimination when it happens. And for students, for example, they can feel it, they can see this minor, discriminations towards them in any way, shape, or form, but it's not like they have been declined the right to study. It's not that. It's these minor things that can be felt in the classroom. This is prioritization to certain students. Actually, I know what I'm talking about because I have faced this, because when you are in the class and certain students' opinion is referred as more valuable, this is discrimination. And how do you actually go to international human rights organizations and talk about this? It's like, it seems to be minor, but these minor things, they actually shape the fact that people from minority groups, they are afraid to speak out, they feel underrepresented, and they do not have as much of opportunity than others. What do you think should be done here? And maybe I can refer to Rita. I know you are doing a lot as well on this front. Maybe you have some insights here.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just quickly to touch upon what Mark said and Georgette said too. So Mark very eloquently put together what recourse there is if somebody should feel that discrimination, if they should feel that they're in that position to do something about it, and they can. However, I wanted to take a step back, and this touches upon what you just said, Angelica, that so many times these are educational institutions that students come from all over the world. They don't all have the same opportunity when they come into the educational institution. So it's not just getting into the educational institution, it's the culture they come from. Do they come from a rural place? Do they come from an urbanization? What are the views on women getting educated, on certain minorities getting educated? I know for a fact, like own relatives, cousins of mine that really struggle to even get any sort of education because they're female. It's just not done. And if you do it, oh, what will society say? Oh, okay, well, you can have an education because if you're a woman, you will only get educated to get married later on. And these sort of, and I'm giving you an exaggerated example just to hone in the point, but these things that infiltrated, they're inbred into the heads of these students, boys and girls, that education is on a level, it's preferential before they even go in. So once these students then go into these education institutions, they're already at that stage where they think, gosh, I'm just grateful to be here. I know I really, really would love to do something later on, but oh, I can't. I have to kind of put myself in this box. So that in itself, they're discriminated against because they're in this box before they even get there. So there's two factors. When, Angelica, you mentioned that when you are in that lecture theatre and there is a lecturer, a professor, somebody who's leading the example that will choose one or the other, some of it is because of that person coming in and maybe how they're sitting, that level of confidence, that level of them thinking, I'm here to get an education, but I can't really aspire to be all that I really always wanted to be. When I was 5 years old, when I didn't even know what the word discrimination meant, when boys and girls could feel they could do the same thing, I still have those dreams, but now I'm a teenager, I'm about to go into my next formative years of my life, I can't quite do it. So there's lots of things that play then. Part of it is the onus is on that student. They're now in a place where technically it's supposed to be equal grounds for everyone. But then what do you do when you have a professor that will only pick a candidate they feel has more voice. And this happens, still happens. I have seen it as well. I go into lecture theatres and I see this happening. And sometimes if you even have a polite word afterwards about communication to the person leading the thing, they don't always understand it. They don't understand, they can't see what they're doing. So these sort of these things that really, really very much still exist, but part of it is on the onus of the student as well as the onus on the faculty that is given the lecture. So I think there's a lot at play there. Part of it is just communication. It's the background that you come from. You know, there is research that shows that whether you are a student or whether you are the lecturer, whether you are in the workplace, that if you happen to be a male and you had a working parent yourself, a working mother, you are more likely to respect the opinion of someone female in an equal playing field to that of a male. And if you didn't, you just won't. And that isn't because you're openly discriminating. This is part of what Georgette talked about, the unconscious bias. This is inbred into your way of thinking and the way you were brought up. So there's so many little things at play. What can we do? We can just make the student a bit more aware of, like, you know, once you're in that university, this is, you know, open playing field. Just show them their aspirations, show them that they have these dreams and it's up to them. The other thing we could do is really open up to faculty and leadership teams to show that, okay, these things are real, this happens. Quite often, again, an exaggerated example, the more experience, the more wisdom that a faculty member has, quite often they can be a little bit more archaic in their practices of delivering a lecture and the way they choose students as well. So things like that, making them a little bit more aware of, you know, having everybody more on a role playing field, having more sort of different avenues to give responses. Communication, we know, for example, that women and men communicate differently. You know, men have a more of a reporting style, women more of a rapport style. Quite often lecturers from an older school of thought don't know how to react with that. So that's where they only pick some people that they want to be short, sharp. So it's just things like that, making them more aware that there are different ways of communicating, listen to everybody. At the end of the day, their job is to get everybody on that playing field, get themselves confident and out there again.
Angelica, I just want to say the things that you were talking about really are the microaggressions and micro inequities that we see every day that people face that are from marginalized communities that happen. And unfortunately, I also think if they don't get called out when they happen, you know, they just get amplified over and over. And I was actually speaking to somebody on Instagram just a couple of days ago around Naomi Osaka, which was playing and somebody sort of hurled an insult. And she broke down and she actually lost the game. And I sort of said, you know, in tennis, it's very quiet when you play. And she actually had said something to the referee and the referee just let the person, and then it actually amplified and she actually ended up losing the game. And I don't know if it would have been different had that person been called out, but I say that when something bad happens, we have a responsibility. If something is continuously, and microaggressions are continuously happening, and you mentioned an example yourself, if that doesn't get called out, it doesn't get shifted. It just gets amplified for that person in that experience. So I think part of that is actually shifting mindsets. And to do that, we require training. And it's more than just training. It's training, it's changing mindsets, it's changing policies, it's changing how we hire. It's a whole set of things that we have to do within organizations and universities to change the way we're going to go, because the future is global. It just is. So.
Thank you so much, Rita, Dr. Georgette. This is extremely important for every institution, and I know there are lots of academics and faculty members that are watching us right now. And please submit your question to the chat box, because this is where our honorary panelists can respond. And I know Mark has lots to say about this issue. Mark.
Yeah, thanks. I just put my hand up because I didn't want to interrupt anybody. I just wanted to say one additional thing, and everybody is right that we need to empower students so they know their rights and they know how to seek recourse and remedy and what options are open to them. But we should also really remember the role of the state here. I mean, the international system of which the international human rights system is part is really state driven. I mean, it's the states that have these obligations to ensure non-discrimination and equality, non-discrimination and equality, sorry, not inequality. And in the context of education, that's incredibly important because universities not only, as we've said before, should they not be discriminating, whether it's the micro discriminations you talked about, Angelica, or whether it's more widespread discrimination. They are not allowed to discriminate. I mean, these are people's human rights, and those human rights cannot be violated just because of the color of somebody's skin or their gender. And I see this, I've seen the Universal Rights Group have seen this a lot in Western democracies. And one of those is the United Kingdom, the country I come from. Now, the United Kingdom has an incredibly unequal education system. It's not only unequal as in access to people of color, for example, or people based on gender, but also based on the socioeconomic background. And we've talked already about subconscious bias and discrimination, but there's another element of the discrimination, which is institutional discrimination. Now, a lot of the top universities in the UK, especially Oxford and Cambridge, they heavily take or source their students from about 12 elite private schools, Eton, Harrow, these kind of schools, which, by the way, Boris Johnson and all of his, nearly all of the current Conservative government in the UK, they all went to these private schools. And from there, it's almost a conveyor belt to Oxford and Cambridge. And these universities have been promising to do something about improving diversity, including of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, for decades. I mean, as long as I've been on this earth, they've been promising it. But it's all, I mean, Cambridge is slightly better than Oxford, but by and large, it's empty promises. And why? Well, the question is because the answer is because they know they can get away with it, because there's no sanction. The government doesn't, partly because the government, most of them went to Oxford and Cambridge and benefited from the current institutional biases. They don't, there's no sanction, there's no calling out of the universities. There's certainly no legal sanction, which is an obligation of the state under international law if they see clear evidence of discrimination. So while we should, yes, focus on empowering students and informing them of their rights, while we should encourage universities to do the right thing, we should also point the finger at states and remind them that they have an obligation to protect and promote the right to education without discrimination.
This is extremely important because this is the work of state together with the universities. And just before we jump to Rita here, I just wanted to give a quick remark that one of the solutions that has been presenting is actually UniRank's engine that helps actually sort out the system, the ranking of universities based on the level of diversity and inclusion. And this what needs to be done because universities like you've mentioned, Oxford, that can get away with it because they are ranked high in the system, still top university, no matter what they do. But if we put this as one of the most important, crucial, actually things that can matter in the long term, the diversity index, the inclusion, the non-discrimination, this is where the change will start. And Rita, towards you, I know you have a lot to add on this.
Yeah, so just really to add and echo what Mark said, I think a lot of it, and he's just literally hit the nail on the head there, is because of there's a quota system that these universities follow. And when you follow a quota system, whether it's in academia, whether it's in the corporate world, this is exactly what you see. It's a very curated, diverse environment, which is actually in a way not real. It's not real life. You know, but if you have the double blinded, say, which is what Georgette referred to earlier on, where you kind of had blinded sort of CVs coming in, you have blinded UCAS forms, sort of the equivalent of your application system in the UK and your sort of GMAT scores or whatever in the US, that way it brings down a lot of these sort of biases as well. And if you compare just private institutions versus public or state-run institutions, the amount of diversity, the amount of socioeconomic background you see there, you can actually see a real difference. The other thing is when you are in an urban setting, a city of some sort, you will naturally see a bit more diversity as well, because outside of the classroom, remember, university education is a very much of a holistic experience. What you do in the classroom is one thing. What you do outside the classroom within those 2, 3, 4 years is also very, very formative in terms of somebody's education. And I think it's important to bring that up because a lot of universities that I help coach, I talk to them about that holistic experience. It's not just the classroom, it's what they can access outside, whether it's the clubs that students get to join, what happens there, what happens and who they can impact afterwards. There's a lot of community run initiatives that students have as well. What can they do? Who can they help? Are the student runs body that can actually tackle this issue that we're talking about right now on this panel discussion, which King's, as an example, Angelica, do very well. There are several institutions that actually do that from a student run level that can actually help students and help call out. Because if you think about it, you can only call out if you feel comfortable doing so, if you know there's not going to be any recourse. There are certain examples where there is unfortunately recourse. If you come from that minority background, if you come from a position where you don't have that village, that you don't have that tribe to support you, you know that if you say something to call what rightfully so out, you can actually, your education can actually stop there. And that unfortunately is the reality with a lot of people face, especially when they come from minority countries and minority places. So there is a balance, but I think it's a holistic approach that isn't just happens in the classroom, but happens outside as well.
And I'm just going to add one more, sorry, I just was going to add one more sentence to that, which is, as we're thinking about what universities look like in the future, who we hire in universities is going to make a difference. So I spent 30 years in a top academic institution in Canada, and some of the challenges were, the university hiring was not diverse. So I remember we were looking at doing something at one point, and it's like, who do you put on the banners? And we couldn't find a diverse group of people to put on the banners. Everybody looked the same. And, I remember being asked, well, we need to find diverse people. And I said, and somebody was upset. And I said, well, this is your history. This is your history for the last 30 years. The campus had been around for 50 years or whatever. And I said, this is your history. You can change your future in terms of the decisions you make moving forward. But I can't get you the diversity that you didn't have by finding people. So, I think when, to your point, Rita, and your point, Mark, like if you want students need to see themselves reflected as well in who's teaching them, not just the administration. And so I think, part of having that inclusion piece and that belonging, and if there's something and there's a human rights violation, you want to talk to someone, yes, there are processes, but if you want to have someone to speak to, you might want to go to someone who looks like you or resembles you, in that team, in that place.
Dr. Georgette, actually, my next question was referred to you. And within your experience countering racism, countering discrimination, I believe that you've countered the situation where staff has been discriminated. And it's not only students, obviously. We have a very big problem with systemic racism and systemic discrimination, where staff cannot reach certain positions in academia while they are minority groups, from minority groups. Luckily, this is changing within last 2 years since Black Lives Matters. However, it's extremely concerning, and it's really horrifying that such movement had to take place to reshape things in academia as well. What do you think needs to be done for every staff member to be guaranteed equality and non-discrimination?
Yeah. So a few things. So in Canada, I'm actually considered a visible minority, even though I might be what you're going to call white passing. So I'm going to put that out there. And so when I worked in an academic institution, I had a very diverse group of people that worked for me and with me. And so they were my colleagues. So I for me, and I was very, they were a great group of people. The success that we had would not have been the success that we had without that team. And there were instances where, senior people around the institution did not treat them well. There's a couple of instances I can recall very clearly. And so as a senior leader and as their boss, if you will, I actually made sure I took those people to task. So there was one particular incident where I had an academic leader actually sent a message to one of my staff that was just very inappropriate. And this was a chair of a department. And, my staff came in and said, oh, Georgette, I'm really sorry. And I went, that you did nothing wrong. And I actually called that person and said, you need to apologize to my staff. And he said, well, I said, no, that was completely out of line. There's a code of conduct at this university. Your behavior, you need to send him an apology, or else I will take this further up the food chain. What would you like to do? Because that's not acceptable. He makes a fraction of what you make. You're completely out of line. He was actually doing his job. He did nothing wrong, unless you can point to something wrong that he did, which as far as I'm aware, he didn't. He said he didn't. Then you, well, I was upset. Not my problem. You owe him an apology. He's a human being, and he did. And so for me, it's important to be an advocate, not just, I always say I don't like people who tick off the box. Say it, share a post. It's great to share a post. Actually, do the work that matters. You speak up for people when it matters. So when I talk about calling it out, I'm going to call it out. Am I going to stick my neck out? If it's wrong, I'm going to stick my neck out. Because if I don't do that, and I'm in a senior leadership role, and I'm going to play nice, so I'm going to make somebody happy, I just used a teachable moment and I gave it up. So I didn't give it up. Did that guy like me? I didn't really care, because you know what? He knew what he was dealing with. So he had to change his behavior, and he knew that I was not going to tolerate that to men. And that was a gentleman, actually, by the way, but he was a visible minority. But he was a fantastic employee, fantastic. But the thing is, if we allow that behavior to perpetuate, then what? So when I talk about calling it out, you actually have to, I didn't do it in front of a ton of people. It was, I called, but then he got the email, person came down and apologized. Did he do it again? No, he thought twice about it, but I'm pretty sure he thought twice about it again if he ever did it again with somebody else, or so I hope. But if we don't do these things, then who will? And if we're in leadership positions and we don't take our positions of privilege, and I considered, being a senior leader position of privilege, if I don't do that, who will? So I think part of that is leading by example, part of that is making those changes, part of that is speaking up and speaking out, and part of that is holding people accountable when necessary. And the other part is my staff saw what I did, the team saw what I did, and I hope that as they become leaders in their organizations, they emulate that behavior when their opportunity comes for them to advocate for others.
Thank you so much, Dr. Georgette. We have just a few minutes left, and I loved how we actually summarized it, because as Abraham Lincoln said, that if you want to check a man, you need to give them the power. And unfortunately, we see lots of examples of power misuse when it comes to issues of equality and discrimination. That's why, as you raise to power position, that's the holy, I think, mission of everyone who get that privilege to speak out no matter what. And as just Rita mentioned, that to have that privilege to speak out is a huge work, because where you have your tribe, you have your community, you're not alone, your voice matters. And this is what is extremely important. And I know that we have great news both for Dr. Georgette and Rita on their books being published. So please share this with our viewers and our audience, because I know how much work you've done in this field, and how many more people can follow your examples just reading what you've done.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. It's been really such a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to quickly just say one thing, that when we talk about equality, at the end of the day, it's about, do you feel that sense of community? Do you feel that sense of belonging? And if you focus on that, then everything else goes out. Does anyone feel like they really, really belong, and that's that place for them? So on that note, I wrote this book called The Goddess of Go-Getting. It was actually published last week on International Women's Day. It actually hit bestseller yesterday, so I'm really, really pleased about that. And it's a book for empowerment for women and minorities and leadership. It's not just a business book. It's not just a memoir. It speaks to everybody. I've written it in a prose, not in my English literature hat on, but in a prose that everybody can understand. It talks about the rules of the playground, going back from childhood, how picking up certain skills when you are young can make you more likable in a university, in a workplace setting later on. It really is a book for everyone. Available everywhere on Amazon, other sort of major retailers, and online. And if you do get it, I hope you like it, and consider writing a review as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rita. And this is extraordinary. And I know that Dr. Georgette has something else to share.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Rita. Yeah, so this is my book. It's called Why Not You? So I strongly believe if you're not actively including, you're probably accidentally excluding. So Why Not You is a book I wrote based on my research. And it really was around a lot of work that I did around women, minorities, BIPOC communities, and marginalized groups. And I also, it takes my research, and it's a book I use in my work, but it's also easy to read. It's not a text-heavy type of book. So 100% of the proceeds from the book go to Women Helping Empower Women, which is the nonprofit that I run. And all the work that we do in that nonprofit is all free to women. We support marginalized communities all over the world. So we support all sorts of initiatives globally. So I hope that people will purchase it. You can purchase it off the website at www.whewwomen.com, and 100% of all of the money from the book go to support that. So thank you so much again for the opportunity.
This is absolutely amazing, and I'm extremely honored to be joined today by leaders that actually shape better world, counter discrimination, and help the community to become more equal, help academia become more equal and more tolerant place. And Mark, just before we finish this conversation, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. What would be your advice, like just in one, maybe 2 sentences, if it's possible, what would be your advice for a student that has counter-discrimination in a class? Where should they go? Who should they contact first? What is their action point?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. A very challenging last question, just when I thought I was off the hook because we were finishing. You know, based on what everybody has said, I think I really enjoyed everybody's interventions. And I think the key is that students should know their rights, know they're valuable, not keep quiet, but talk to people. If that's somebody they trust in the faculty, in the teaching staff, or if it's a mentor, just do talk out, because universities, and as I've said, states are not allowed. It's illegal to discriminate, and it's bad for the university, it's bad for the society, and so do speak out. And if they don't get satisfaction from, I mean, not all teachers are as nice as Georgette, not all leaders are as nice as Georgette and Rita, so maybe they wouldn't get the answer they need. But if they don't, then, as Georgette said, it should go up the food chain, and complaints should be made to the relevant authorities. And if that doesn't work, then, as I said at the beginning, and often students, sadly, people don't know that, they also have recourse to the international human rights protection mechanisms. And why not push it all the way? Because it's only by pushing that we get change.
This is a brilliant way to summarize our today's discussion. Only through pushing we can actually make a change. Do not be afraid to push. And it's been my privilege to be joined by leaders of today, shaping leaders of tomorrow in their academic environment and in their communities. Thank you so much, Rita, Dr. Georgette, Mark. It's been a great honor and pleasure, and I'm sure that we will see you again soon in our next panel discussion. Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.